So I made a few phone calls and got the Scientology, and the nurses are going, what are they doing to our baby, Chaplain? Nothing, they're just pushing the energy field back in. And it's like, apparently there was a bulge up here somewhere. Really, that's what they were doing. I mean, I'm making fun of them a little bit, and I hope maybe they have a chance to make fun of the way, well, I don't know, Baptists don't do anything funny, so I don't know what they'd make fun of. But anyway, it's still all about saying, I want to hold a place of respect for what you believe. And especially, I remember the Jehovah's Witness person told me, you know, all the ministers treat us ugly. Well, there's a reason for it. No, I didn't. I said, I just, you know, we want to help you find meaning. What's important to you at this time? So I just asked them questions, and there's a couple of questions I ask people when I walk into the hospital room. The first question I ask, and this is a question, if you take notes, is a question you can ask people. You don't say, don't walk in and say, what church do you go to? Because that's just saying, I know you have to be a Christian, so which church do you go to? Or, you know, so, but I say, can you tell me a bit, do you have anything, and I do this because I want him to understand I'm struggling to, but do you have a spirituality? Do you have a religion or a church? How do you find your meaning? I just asked the question, you know, what's important to you during an illness? How does that come across? And so I ask that question. I ask people all the time, do you have some sort of spirituality, is what I usually say. And I say, I'm not here to baptize you, convert you, or even take an offering. I'm just, you know, I'm only here to say, what is important to you? And, you know, occasionally somebody responds. One woman said, I don't have any spirituality, but I'm ready. And so that was my way to say, okay, well, I can tell you what's important to me, and where I find my meaning is from the Christ revealed in the Bible, or from the God revealed by Christ in the Bible. So that's my moment to talk to them. But most of the time, I'm just trying to get them to tell me what's important. So where do you get your spirituality? Where do you get a connection with something? So we have a sergeant in our unit, and she and I went out with a couple of other guys for a walk, and I asked her, I thought she went to church, and so I made them decide, what church do you go to? I'm an atheist, Chaplain, but I keep that a secret. And I said, why do you keep that a secret? No, because people just hate us. And so, but you know, as I began to walk on the walk, I found out where she got her meaning. She's a sort of an amateur botanist, and she would explain to me all the plants. So we were on a tour in Hawaii. I know, tough duty. Somebody had to do it. But anyway, so we were there, and so she's explained to me all these meanings of the plants, and that's how she connects with nature, and that's how she connects and finds meaning in her life. So, but I ask people, the second question I ask is, what are you praying for? Well, what would you ask an atheist? Well, they don't pray. Well, what are you hoping for? What is it that right now, there's got to be something on your heart, you know? I tell people this, we go into church all the time and we say, and you probably got asked this morning, somebody said to you, how are you? And you said, wait, all of you? All of you said fine. Every one of you said fine. And you're not, I know you're not. Cliff told me lots of stories. No, but I know you're not. And so, because, you know, I'm not entirely. I mean, you know, I try to write in a column. My daughter's getting married this week, and I'm a little concerned. I mean, she's marrying a person who's an agnostic, and I'm like, oh. So, I mean, but people still find their spiritual meaning, and I'm still praying for him. But where do you find your meaning? And so I ask people, what are you praying for? What are you hoping for? And they'll tell you. And if I asked you right now, what are you praying for? You would probably respond with something out of your heart. And whether you're agnostic, atheistic, or just a Baptist, there's something in your heart that hurts, something in your heart that you're hoping for. That's the spiritual message. If we don't understand what people are hoping for in Iraq, what they are praying for, what they are deeply disturbed about, then we are not going to end this conflict. So I asked them, what are you praying for? And then I asked them, what's the scariest part? Especially in the hospital, I say, what's the scariest part of all this? Because patients, when I visit them in the hospital, there's always this scary part. Many of them tell me that if only they knew what was going to happen, they could be prepared for it. Particularly, they name the powerlessness. That's what most people are afraid of. They've lost power, and they really want the power back. They really want some control back of their lives, and they don't have one. And so I have another daughter. She's going through school, and the money is just flowing. It's just like going. It's just, where did it go? Some more money. Oh, I need some more money. I wear this shirt that says FDIC, and it stands for Flat Broke Daughter in College. And so, I want some. I do. My wife and I were talking. 5 more months of this. 5 more months, and we got our money. Our money is to stop just disappearing down a drain somewhere. So we want that control back. We want power back. And so when it comes to powerlessness, I tell people there's a couple steps you go through, and we got to admit we're powerless, and we got to believe in a power greater than ourselves. That greater than ourselves could restore us. As a Baptist, I'm in a 12-step program for Baptists. Our first step was to admit that there's a higher power than a convention. So we are powerless, and it's a spiritual question when we're powerless. And you have to think of all the people in third world countries who feel so powerless because they're not connected now to this new, to the world. And it could be a spiritual issue for a church to address, to buy these $100 laptop computers that they're trying to put out. And if you've read about them, they're powered up by a crank, and they put these things out in the middle of the bush country in Africa, and people start getting connected, and they find out what's important to each other. Buying computers for third world countries could be a spiritual issue for a group to address. So then I ask people, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And that question I love comes from Dr. Spencer Johnson's book, Who Moved My Cheese? And it's a great little parable, small book, Who Moved My Cheese? You could read it in an hour and a half if you're a chaplain, because you have to understand all the meaning. What does that mean? What does that mean? So, but anyway, I asked them, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And people a lot of times say, well, I don't know. And then I ask them what I used to ask my children when they said, I don't know. I'd say, what would you want if you did know? Wait. But if you did know, what would it be? And they actually answer that one. Well, if I did know, I'd know that I want my health back. Oh, okay. So, but deep down, I think people know what they're afraid of, and they know what they would do if they weren't afraid. And so, when I left I read that book just as I was leaving active duty at Patrick, and I was afraid, very afraid, and because especially when I got to reading my orders, it said that my home record was in Texas. You're going to move me to Texas? So I didn't, but they didn't. So I got to move back to my real home state of California. But I was afraid. What do I do? What do you do what would you really want to do if you weren't afraid? And so I got out of that. I said, well, I really want to go back to work as a hospital chaplain. I asked the Air Force for all my 7 years of active duty, begged them to send me to a hospital. And so they never did, and so finally I said, well, let's go to a hospital. And I did that work because that's what I really wanted to do, but I had been afraid to leave and step out back on my own. So what would we do if we weren't afraid is a spiritual question, and I try to get to people, tell me, what is it that you really want to do? And no patient has ever told me that he was afraid he hadn't spent more time in the office. No hospice patient has ever told me that she loved too much, and they've never said, I'm afraid I made too much money. No, what they've always wanted, what they've always wished for, and what they would have done if they hadn't have been so afraid would really be to express more love toward people, to be more connected to some people. They wish they had spent more time with their families. They had wished they had done more to know God. They wish they had spent time facing the real questions of life.